Okay, let's talk about something that happens all the time. We spend, what, a third of our lives at work? So it's really no surprise that friendships, relationships, and yeah, even romances get their start there. But what happens when that office romance goes south? When the charm turns to harm and the whole messy situation lands in a courtroom? That's exactly what we're going to unpack today.
And I mean, this is not a rare thing. Just how common is it? Well, get this. The estimates are that around 10 million workplace romances start every single year, and that's just in the United States. It's just a fundamental part of professional life at this point. In fact, if you look at surveys, about 40% of all employees say they've had a workplace romance at some point in their career. So chances are pretty high that either you or someone on your team has been there. But, there's another side to this coin, a really tough one. A staggering 24% of women in the U.S. workforce report that they've experienced sexual harassment. That's almost 1 in 4. It's a serious and completely illegal reality.
And that right there is the central question for us. What happens when a consensual relationship ends, but one person's behavior crosses the line into harassment? How on earth does a court untangle a past that was welcome from a present that is very, very unwelcome?
So here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll define the problem. Then, we'll look at 2 competing ideas for how judges might even think about these cases. We'll go inside the actual research that dug into 51 real court cases, reveal what the judges actually decided, uncover a kind of hidden penalty, and finally, we'll talk about why all of this really matters.
All right, first things first. We have to be absolutely crystal clear about where the line is. What is the fundamental difference between a totally fine workplace romance and illegal sexual harassment?
It really boils down to one critical thing. On one side, you've got romance. It's consensual, it's welcome, and it's perfectly legal. On the other side, you have sexual harassment. It's unwelcome, it's unwanted, and it's absolutely illegal. That boundary is that single word, unwelcome. And believe me, this isn't just a hypothetical problem. The data from the Society for Human Resource Management is pretty eye-opening. They found that almost a quarter of HR pros say that sexual harassment claims in their company actually started out as a workplace romance. This is a real, challenging issue that organizations are dealing with constantly. So, let's say one of these cases makes its way to court. How in the world does a judge make a decision? Well, the researchers we're looking at here identified 2 competing models for how a judge might approach this. So let's put these 2 theories on trial.
This is the heart of the mystery, right? We all know these situations can be incredibly messy. Maybe it was an extramarital affair, or maybe it broke a clear company policy, or maybe it was between a supervisor and someone who reported to them. The big question is, does any of that messy, extra-legal stuff actually influence how a judge rules? Okay, so this brings us to our 2 suspects. First is the traditional legal model. This is what you learn in law school. It says judges have to be legal purists. They can only look at the cold, hard facts of the harassment claim. The second theory is the ethical decision-making model. And this one suggests that, hey, judges are human beings. Maybe they're subconsciously swayed by those ethically charged details. So which one is it? To figure this out, the researchers knew they couldn't just, ask judges. They had to look at what judges actually did. So they basically launched their own investigation into the court records. And their method was really thorough. They combed through legal databases looking for sexual harassment cases where the 2 people involved had a prior consensual relationship. They found 51 of them. Then they went through each case and coded for dozens of different features, the strictly legal ones like how severe the harassment was, and all those ethically messy ones like if it was an affair. Finally, they just ran the numbers to see what actually predicted a win for the person making the claim. Okay, the evidence is in. The analysis is done. So what did the researchers find? Which theory was right? Let's look at the verdict. Well, the results were honestly crystal clear. Only 2 things consistently predicted how a judge would rule: how severe the harassment was, and whether or not there were any witnesses. And all that messy extra-legal stuff, whether the romance was an affair or between a boss and a subordinate or if it broke company policy, none of it had any real statistical impact on the outcome. So this is the first huge takeaway. The investigation found that judges overwhelmingly stick to that traditional legal model. They really do act as legal purists, filtering out the ethical noise and just focusing on the legal facts of the harassment claim. In that sense, the system seems to be working exactly like it's supposed to. But
And this is a really, really big but. The story is not over. While the researchers were digging through all this data, they stumbled on a shocking twist, something they weren't even looking for, that completely changes the picture.
So get ready for this. We just established that the details of the past romance, the who, what, when, where, they don't seem to matter to the judge. But what if just the simple fact that there was a prior romance? What if that has an effect all on its own?
Here is the bombshell. The researchers compared their 51 cases to similar harassment cases where there was no prior romance. And in those cases, the person making the claim won about 53% of the time. But in the cases with a prior romance, the success rate dropped all the way to 31%. Just having been in a relationship before dramatically hurts a person's chances of winning their harassment case. And this is what the researchers ended up calling the prior romance penalty. It's like this hidden legal risk for anyone who dates at work.
So let's recap. We have two huge findings. First, judges are objective and they follow the letter of the law. And second, even with that objectivity, the mere existence of a past romance seems to tank a plaintiff's case. So let's talk about why this disconnect is so incredibly important for all of us.
So what does this all mean? Well, it exposes this huge divide. Judges are using a strict legal playbook, but they're creating this hidden risk for employees and a real headache for companies. I mean, should companies even have romance policies if courts don't care about them? It creates a paradox. The good news is the system seems objective, but the bad news is that same objectivity can lead to outcomes that feel deeply unfair. And that leaves us with this final, really challenging question. We know people will continue to find love at work. It's just reality. But we now know the legal system, even while being objective about the messy details, slaps a heavy penalty on harassment claims that follow a breakup. So how should we, as individuals and organizations, navigate that? How do we handle this intersection of law, ethics, and the very human need for connection? Honestly, there are no easy answers.